They told me the station was dead, closed, silent, forgotten. But that night, I heard the low hum of rails and saw lights cutting through the fog, a train that shouldn't exist. I went there to find proof, and instead, it found me. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. This happened in western Ukraine, on the disused spur that once fed the small railway station of Novoselish. It was late October, raw and windless, the kind of cold that soaks through gloves and makes your breath appear like smoke. My name is Adam, 34, a civil engineer contracted by the regional railway. I was sent alone to survey the remnants of the branch line before final dismantling. The brief said the rails were long dead, the signals stripped, the power cut years ago. The date on my work order was the 20th. By then, the birches along the embankment had already turned the color of old paper. Novoselish had been closed since 1999, after a bridge sagged under spring flood and the route was abandoned instead of repaired. Most maps now show a gray line where a black one used to run. When I asked directions at the only shop in town, the woman behind the counter looked at my hard hat and said, without smiling, that I should not stay there after dark. She did not wink or dramatize it. She rang up my batteries and waved me off the way people do when they are trying not to get involved. By late afternoon I was on foot, following the gravel verge beside the rails. The ballast had settled into ruts. Grass poked through the sleepers. My boots clicked against stray fish plates like cutlery in an empty room. I logged distances and photographed cracks with a handheld, marking coordinates as I went. The silence out there was different from ordinary quiet. Even crows kept high, as if the line itself made them uneasy. Twice I stopped and listened for road traffic, but there was none. Only the dry whisper of reeds. Just before dusk I reached the station yard. Novoselish was not much to look at, a low building with boarded windows, a clock face that had surrendered its hands, a signal mast that should have been dismantled years ago. The platform edge flaked under my glove. I checked the old relay box out of habit and confirmed there was no feed. No electricity, no control, nothing to wake even a red lamp. I radioed my site note to the office and got nothing but weather reports stepping on the channel. The sun slid behind the trees and the yard flattened into a single sheet of gray. I told myself I would finish the western turnout and be back at the car by 1900. That is when I heard the first sound. It was low and far, like a truck climbing a hill, except there is no hill and no road beyond the station. The air seemed to lean toward it. I took out my phone and checked the spectrum app. The peak was about 40 Hz. Metal somewhere, moving. There are rational explanations for many things described as strange. Rails can sing when they contract in the cold. Wind in a culvert can mimic a horn. I put the phone away and walked the turnout with my headlamp on its lowest setting to save battery. The noise did not fade. It built itself into the familiar, layered hum of a train taking a distant curve. I caught myself turning to look down a line that has not carried a timetable in a quarter of a century. A flicker passed across the signal face. I stood very still and watched the dead mast. Nothing. The wind picked up, then quit. I laughed, a small dry sound that belonged to someone else, and told my recorder the mast was reflecting my lamp. I said it twice because saying things makes them true. At 1857, by my log, the hum thinned into a fine, even vibration that I felt in my boots more than heard. My mind conjured ballast shifting under weight. My hands were already cold, but I remember the particular cold that arrived then, as if the air had been drained rather than chilled. I keyed the radio for a test. Static only. Then the static shaped itself into syllables. 2 words, blurred by the grit of the channel, but as clean as a station announcement in their cadence. Station Novoselish. The rest broke apart. I answered with my call sign, expecting nothing. The voice returned, faint and formal, the way an automatic system might sound after years of neglect. Receiving passengers. The radio hissed and went quiet. I did the sensible thing. I told the recorder the unit had picked up a stray broadcast from freight traffic on the main line. I cataloged the turnout bolts as if nothing had changed. I photographed the rotten timbers. When I finally lifted my head, there was a gauze of mist across the yard and the rails were darker than the ground, like a riverbed seen at night. I walked to the end of the platform and looked down the straight. The mist trembled. Somewhere in it, a light pulsed once, not white but the old sodium yellow that used to stain the undersides of bridges. I stepped back to the building wall and listened for any actual approach, grinding, clatter, the metallic languages that trains speak even when they try to be quiet. There was none, only the steady pressure of a thing that claimed to be near without proving it. The signal face blinked a soft red, held for 2 seconds, and died. I placed my glove against the mast. It was warm. I have walked active stations at midnight, stood inches from engines that pulled whole cities behind them, seen men hang out of cabs with their mugs and their tired jokes. What scared me then was not noise or size but the procedure of it, the sense that an operation was underway according to rules I did not know. I called the office again. No reply. I called the shop number I had saved from the receipt. A ring, then a click, then silence that felt intentional. At 19:12 I decided to leave the yard and return in daylight. I packed the tape, the camera, the tablet. I wrote the word in my notebook without thinking why, arrives. I took one last photograph of the platform edge. In the frame, after, there is a blur like a sleeve on the far track, darker than mist. It could be nothing. It could be my hand. But I know where my hands were. I walked back along the line, not running, not turning my headlamp to full, because people who run trip and people who flood the dark with light see more than they need. The hum followed me as far as the culvert and then let go. When I reached the car, the windshield had a film of dew on the inside. My radio, without my touch, crackled once more in the passenger seat. Station Novoselish, receiving passengers. Then only the fan ticking as it cooled. I filed the day's report with numbers and coordinates and wrote nothing that would embarrass me in the morning. I slept badly. At 4, I woke to a single short tone on my phone, the one reserved for alerts from railway systems. There was no message on the screen. There was, however, a calendar entry I had not made, set for midnight the next night, at the location tagged by my device near the platform. Its title was one word, automated by some old metadata the network must have scraped and misread. Arrival. The next night I told myself I was only going back to collect the data logger I'd left on the site. That was partly true. What I really wanted was to confirm that what I'd heard, the voice, the hum, had a normal explanation. Engineers need causes, not ghosts. I charged my camera batteries, packed 2 lamps, and set off just after 10. The weather had changed, fog pulled low across the fields, and the sky looked varnished, colorless. The road to Novoselish was narrower than I remembered. The headlights struck the mist in thick cones that ended only a few meters ahead. When I parked at the junction, the air smelled of wet iron. No insects, no distant dogs. Even the ticking of my cooling engine sounded too loud. I locked the car, slung the camera strap over my shoulder, and started down the embankment. By the time I reached the station, the fog was dense enough to dull my beam. The platform emerged in slices, first the sign with half the letters missing, then the shelter, then the mast. Everything looked exactly as I had left it, except that the gravel underfoot seemed recently disturbed, as though something heavy had rolled through. I crouched and touched the rail. It was colder than the air, but there was the faintest tremor, like a heartbeat deep underground. I switched on the camera and let it record while I called into the fog. My voice vanished instantly. No echo, just the thick hiss of night air. At 23:57, the old signal mast, disconnected, unpowered, flashed a sudden red. Not a reflection, not a camera glitch. A full, round pulse that painted the mist for 2 seconds. I stepped closer, shielding my eyes. The beam inside the lens burned too steady to be an accident. Then, just as abruptly, it died. The vibration grew until it was unmistakable. Rails do not move when they are dead metal, but these did. I felt it through my soles, a living thrum running ahead of something large. Out beyond the curve, a sound gathered, a low grinding, the kind of deep steel music a train makes when it begins to break. I raised the camera, expecting darkness. What I saw instead was a shape forming in the fog, tall and rectangular, with two dim yellow eyes. It was an engine, an old Soviet diesel, the kind I had only seen in manuals, boxy front, rusted sides, faded numerals. No lights inside the cabin, no smoke from the exhaust. The thing moved with deliberate slowness, its wheels sparking faintly on rails that should have been rust-locked decades ago. I could not smell fuel or hear the diesel growl, only that dense hum that filled every pocket of air. I should have run, but curiosity has a way of holding you still. The train rolled past the platform, silent except for a whisper of metal on metal. I aimed a lens through one of the passenger windows. Behind the grime, shapes sat motionless, rows of figures frozen mid-journey, pale faces turned toward the front. The glass reflected nothing, not even my own light. I counted 3 cars before the fog swallowed the tail. Then the sound faded, leaving only the faint echo of brakes and a hiss like escaping steam. For nearly a minute I stood there, waiting for it to come back. Nothing did. The rails were dull again, the signal dead. I checked the camera screen, the recording light was still blinking. Relief came only when I reached the car and shut myself inside. My hands shook as I reviewed the footage. The first minutes showed exactly what I'd seen, the platform, the fog, the signal flare. But at the moment when the train should appear, the image dissolved into static. I slowed the playback and studied each frame. At 0:03, between the bursts of interference, a figure appeared for less than a second. A man, standing on the far side of the track, wearing an old conductor's coat and cap. His face was indistinct, but the posture was rigid, the head slightly turned toward the camera as if aware of being watched. Then the image collapsed into a blur of white noise. I replayed it again and again until the battery died. The figure was always there, just before the signal faded. I enlarged the frame on my laptop later at home and noticed something else, the badge on his coat. The number 4017, stamped in brass. That number triggered a memory from a database I had browsed earlier. There was once a train with that designation, number 4017, Kiev to Lviv, reported lost in 1999 after a bridge collapsed near this same line. The official report listed 48 missing. The file ended with a single phrase, search concluded, cause undetermined. At 2:10 a.m., while cross-checking the coordinates, my phone's screen blinked on its own. A new notification had appeared in the same format as system alerts. Next stop, Novoselish. Arrival midnight. No sender, no metadata. I deleted it immediately, convinced it was a bug. Yet even after the phone was off, I could still hear a faint vibration in the house, rhythmic, distant, like steel wheels on track joints. The following day I said nothing to anyone at the office. I told myself I would sleep, then decide whether to report what I'd seen. But when night began to settle, and the first thin fog returned beyond the windows, I knew sleep wouldn't come. Something about the place wasn't finished with me. That evening, before shutting down the computer, I replayed the clip one more time. As the frame glitched, the conductor's silhouette sharpened for a breath of a second. He was standing closer now, almost at the edge of the platform. 2 days passed before I touched the footage again. By then the image of that silent train was fused somewhere behind my eyelids. I would see its headlamps floating in the dark whenever I closed them. Logic became my shield. If there was a ghost, there had to be a record. Trains leave paperwork the way ships leave wakes. So I began to search. I called an old friend at the railway archives in Lviv. He sounded half asleep until I mentioned the number 4017. The pause that followed stretched too long. Then he said quietly that there had been a disappearance, yes, but the documents weren't open to the public. When I insisted it was for engineering assessment, he hesitated again and finally told me to come in person. The archive sat in a government building that smelled of mold and paper glue. Inside the reading room, the lights hummed faintly, and the air felt warmer than it should. My friend, Serhiy, met me with a folder already waiting. Its label was faint, written in pencil, March 5, 1999, Train 4017. The file wasn't long. A printed dispatch order, a maintenance log, a few faded photographs. The official report claimed a bridge near Novoselish collapsed under the engine's weight during a flood. Yet no wreckage was ever found downstream, no oil slick, no bodies. The recovery boats had searched for weeks until funding ended. 48 passengers, 2 crew. Presumed dead, 'cause undetermined. One annex caught my eye, a list of personal effects supposedly retrieved from the area weeks later. Items of clothing, a child's backpack, and a silver pocket watch engraved with initials SK. The same initials printed at the bottom of the report, Station Master Serhiy Kovalenko. I asked my friend if that name was familiar. He exhaled through his teeth. He's alive, he said. He retired in 2001. Moved back to Novoselish. But you won't get much from him. I drove there the same evening. The village was smaller than memory, only a row of houses folded along a gravel road. The air smelled of coal smoke and river mud. I found Kovalenko's address from an old postal registry. His house was a single-story structure with lace curtains yellowed by age. I knocked 3 times before the door opened a crack. He was an old man, late 70s, his skin gray like the fog outside. When I introduced myself and mentioned the train, his expression didn't change. He invited me in without a word. Inside, the walls were covered with framed schedules and a single photograph of a locomotive, black and white, dated 1998. He poured tea that smelled faintly of rust. I was the night master, he said at last. That train was late. 20 minutes, maybe less. It radioed once near the bridge. Then silence. I sent a signal. No answer. He looked at the photograph as he spoke. We searched. They told me to forget it. I asked if he believed the train really fell. He shook his head slowly. The river was low. We found the bridge still standing. He took a sip, his hand trembling. But the rails, they were warm. 4 days. After that, no one went near them. His voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes it comes back. You hear the horn. You see the light in the fog. Always when someone speaks its name. I wanted to ask more, but he set down his cup with a sharp sound and stared at me as if realizing how much he'd said. You shouldn't have gone there, he murmured. Once it knows you, it doesn't forget. When I left, the street was empty, though I could hear faint humming behind me. At first I thought it was wine through the wires. Then I noticed there were no wires overhead, just a dark strip of sky, cloudless and still. Back in my car, I checked the dash clock. The digital time blinked 23:40, then froze. My phone battery, full an hour ago, dropped to 1%. I started the engine, and the headlights flickered twice before stabilizing. The road to the main highway wound through fields lined with old telegraph poles, most of them broken. Halfway through the drive, the radio clicked on by itself. Static, then a voice, thin, mechanical, distant. It repeated the same message I'd heard on site, Station Novoselish, receiving passengers. I switched it off, but the sound continued faintly, as if it were coming from inside the dashboard. When I reached the city, everything felt slightly out of phase. Streetlights buzzed too loud, reflections in windows delayed by a breath. I uploaded the archival scans to my computer, saving copies in 3 folders, afraid they might vanish. That night, unable to sleep, I read the names of the 48 passengers aloud one by one. Most were from small towns. At the bottom, beneath the conductor's name, another signature caught my attention, Maintenance Engineer, Adam S. It wasn't mine, of course, but the initials matched. I checked the date again. The document was stamped 2 weeks before the supposed collapse, yet my name didn't exist anywhere in the system back then. The coincidence felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Around 3 a.m., the walls of my apartment trembled lightly. The same vibration I'd felt through the rails. I opened the curtains, expecting stillness, and saw nothing but fog curling along the street, glowing faintly under the lamps. Somewhere inside that haze, a single long horn sounded, low, mournful, fading east toward the tracks that no longer existed. My computer screen brightened behind me. The folder of scanned documents opened on its own. Every file except one deleted itself. The last remaining image was the passenger manifest. New text had appeared at the bottom, typed in the same font as the original but impossible to have been edited by me. Receiving passengers. Arrival confirmed. I shut the lid, heart pounding, and sat in the dark until dawn, listening to a phantom rhythm beneath the floorboards, steel wheels passing over old, invisible rails, moving steadily towards somewhere no map can name. By the next evening, sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the long, low hum of rails under pressure and saw flashes of yellow light cutting through fog. I tried to reason it away: stress, overwork, suggestibility, but the logical mind is a poor defense against what repeats itself in silence. That night, I made a decision that I justified as professional curiosity. In truth, it was obsession. I had to go back to Novoselic one final time and record whatever was happening with enough proof to make it real, or to make it stop haunting me. I left just before 11, carrying 2 cameras, 3 external lights, and a tripod. The temperature had dropped close to freezing, and fog clung to the fields like thin cloth. The road was darker than before, the power lines seemed swallowed by the sky. When I parked at the same turnout, frost covered the windshield from the inside again. I wiped it with my sleeve, trying not to think about the way the moisture always formed on the interior glass. The walk toward the station felt longer this time. My boots sank into the gravel, crunching softly, and each step echoed off the sleepers as if someone were walking behind me at a perfect delay. I didn't turn around. The air was heavy, the kind that presses on your lungs when it's about to snow. At 23:46, I reached the platform and began setting up the cameras, angling one toward the line, another toward the building, and a third toward the signal mast. I checked my watch. The digital numbers glowed weakly: 23:59. The air turned sharp, metallic. A sudden vibration rippled through the rails. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then the nearest tripod rattled. The red light on the dead signal flared back to life, steady and bright. My breath came out in clouds. The fog in front of me thickened, curling like smoke from an unseen fire. Then came the sound, deep, mechanical, layered, but strangely distant, like something heavy moving through another dimension of air. From the white wall of mist, 2 headlamps appeared, dim and yellow, exactly as before. They approached slowly, impossibly silent except for the deep vibration rising through the ground. When the shape became clearer, I saw the same rusted locomotive from the recording, its metal skin eaten by time. The train slowed until the front wheels aligned perfectly with the platform edge. No driver in the cab. No lights inside the cars. Yet through the grime, I could make out faces behind the glass, still, expressionless, as if trapped mid-journey. Men in coats from another decade, women clutching handbags, a boy holding a paper ticket between both hands. None of them moved. The door of the first carriage opened with a mechanical sigh. A wave of cold air spilled out, colder than the fog. From inside stepped a man in an old conductor's uniform. The same figure I had captured on video. His coat was soaked as though he had walked out of a river. A brass badge glinted faintly on his chest: 4017. He stopped at the edge of the platform, no more than 3 meters from me. His face was pale, the features indistinct, almost like smoke caught in the shape of a man. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then, in a voice so calm it didn't sound human, he spoke. "The train was delayed," he said. "But your ticket is ready." He extended his hand. And it was a small, weathered slip of paper, the same kind used in the 1990s. Printed in faded ink was a single name: Adam S. The rest of the text had bled away. I wanted to move, to run, to shout that I was only there to document, but my body stayed rooted. My hands trembled as I took the ticket. The moment my fingers touched it, every light on my cameras blinked out at once. The fog pulsed inward, swallowing the edges of the platform. Behind the conductor, faint whispers rose inside the cars. a rustle of many voices speaking over each other in the same rhythm as wheels on track. The conductor stepped aside and gestured toward the open door. "We've been waiting," he said. A gust of freezing wind swept through the station, and for a moment I thought I saw movement in the seats inside, passengers turning their heads, eyes reflecting faint gold. My mind screamed to back away, but my legs moved forward on their own, one step, then another, drawn by something older than fear. A sudden noise cut through the fog, a blaring horn so close it felt like it split the air. I stumbled backward, clutching the ticket. The door slid shut, and the train's headlights flared to white. The conductor turned, climbed aboard, and vanished behind the glass. Without a sound of acceleration, the train began to move. Its wheels glided across the rails as if pulled by the fog itself. Within seconds, the light receded, leaving nothing but the empty platform. The vibration underfoot faded until even the night insects dared to return. I stood alone, shaking, the paper ticket still in my hand. When I looked down, the ink had smeared completely. Only a faint imprint remained where my name had been printed. By the time I reached my car, the frost had formed again on the windows, but this time, as I turned the key, I noticed something written across the inside of the windshield. Letters traced by a finger in condensation. Departure, midnight. The engine coughed once and died. The lights on the dashboard went dark. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the fields, a horn sounded again, long, mournful, and moving slowly west. 3 days later, when Adam failed to answer his phone or return to work, the railway office filed a missing person report. The last signal from his GPS showed him parked near the old Novoselish spur. When a search team arrived, they found his car pulled off the gravel road, keys still in the ignition, the driver's door open. On the passenger seat lay a folded map, a dead phone, and a camera with the lens cracked but intact. The air smelled faintly of burnt oil and cold iron. Inside the trunk was a backpack containing tools, a flashlight, and a notebook labeled survey log. The final entry, dated the night of his disappearance, read only 2 words, "It's back." Beneath them, a hand-drawn sketch of the station platform and a single rail line fading into fog. There were no footprints leading away from the car, only the parallel marks of old steel wheels pressed into the frozen gravel and ending abruptly after 20 meters. When police recovered the camera, they found one final recording time-stamped 23:58. The image begins in darkness, then the view steadies, Adam's breathing audible behind the microphone. The lens faces the platform. The red signal lamp is glowing steadily. The camera shakes slightly as he adjusts the tripod. A low vibration fills the audio, the same tone captured in his earlier footage. It grows louder until the wind microphone distorts. Then, faintly, a horn. Through the fog, the outline of the train emerges, exactly as in the previous recordings, the dull yellow lights, the rusted metal sides, the mist swirling around the wheels. The video trembles as if the ground itself were moving. The engine rolls past the camera, stopping perfectly aligned with the platform edge. A moment of silence follows, then the sound of air brakes. The door slides open. The conductor steps out, coat dripping, cap shadowing his eyes. His voice is calm, mechanical. "Boarding complete," he says. The camera tilts, the image catches Adam's hand reaching forward, ticket visible between his fingers. The lens tips toward the ground, then the sound distorts into static. For 12 seconds the picture is pure noise. Then it clears briefly. The view is from the platform, pointed toward the open door of the first carriage. Inside, rows of passengers sit motionless. Their faces are gray and blurred by fog on the glass. In the third window from the front, a reflection appears, Adam, standing outside, looking in. The image flickers once more, then the train begins to move. As the cars roll past, the final frame freezes on the conductor, staring directly into the lens. His lips move, forming a single phrase, barely audible under the static, "Receiving passengers." The screen cuts to black. Investigators could not explain how a powered signal operated without electricity or why the rails beneath the platform were still warm hours after the recording ended. The locomotive's number, 4017, matched the train declared lost in 1999. No trace of Adam was found within the 10-kilometer search radius, not even a footprint. A week later, a villager reported seeing lights at the abandoned station again. He described them as soft yellow, like old carriage lamps, moving slowly through the fog. When the sound of wheels faded, he walked to the platform out of curiosity. He found the ground freshly disturbed and a small paper ticket lying in the frost. The ink had run, but the name was still legible, Adam S. The report never reached national news. The authorities labeled it an accident, citing unstable ground near the tracks. The file was sealed and stored with the original 1999 investigation under the same number, 4017. Since then, locals say the station is quiet most nights, except near midnight, when a distant horn echoes across the fields. Some swear they see the faint glow of carriage windows through the fog, and sometimes, if the air is still enough, a voice drifts on the wind, repeating the same phrase caught on Adam's radio, "Station Novoselish, receiving passengers." The official story ends there, but the footage recovered from Adam's camera has one final second that police overlooked. It is blank at first, then the image brightens as if a light passes close to the lens. For a fraction of a moment, the reflection of a man appears, wearing a railway conductor's cap, eyes hollow, mouth frozen midward. Behind him, a row of passengers stares forward in silence. Among them, in the third window, sits a man in a modern jacket, looking straight at the camera, his hands folded neatly around a paper ticket. His face is unmistakable. It is Adam.